Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you've still got your energy around you. How else would you know that young people are here? But we're really excited to be having what I call an intergenerational conversation this evening. The topic of our focus is building trust through sustainable institutions. It's a very interesting panel that we've got. We've got two former presidents of two of the countries that have had long traditions of democracy, Tanzania and Ghana. And then we've got three global shapers. Come on, guys. So let me do proper introductions. Immediately to my left, we've got President John Mahama, the former president of Ghana. And then we've got Raksha Ramloll, who is the Chairperson, National Youth Council of Mauritius. Welcome her. And then we've got Mbanda, we've got President Jakaya Kikwete, former president of Tanzania. And then we've got Ms. Bodwell, who is performance auditor in the office of the Auditor General of Seychelles. And then we've got Mbanda, Epanty, Agbor, It's like I'm going to add one more name to that. He's from Cameroon, and he's a lawyer by profession. And then, of course, we've got all of you. I usually am excited about people who have a real interest in a topic. I don't like the market square kind of people. So the number that we are is just about right for this kind of a conversation. And I'm going to want to start with you in the audience. What did you have in mind when you were coming? My dear friend, trust. What's the meaning of trust? What kind of trust have you come here to listen to? Yes?
So what kind of trust have I come here to listen? I think we're looking into the future, and we're looking to build partnerships with those who are leading us. And we think trust is important, because if you don't trust the person who is leading you, you would view everything that he does with a lot of skepticism. And so it's very important for the leaders to build a lot of trust with the young generation, so that we're all working on the same wavelength as to what needs to be done to guarantee a better future.
Trust in the leadership. Is there someone who wants to add something to that?
My name is Ibrahim Mustafa, a global shipper from Ghana, Tamale Hub. To be frank, when I saw the panel, first of all, there were two reasons. First of all, to come and support my other shippers, and to also come and listen to my former president. And why am I here? Just because of the trust I have the global shippers community first, and the trust I have in Ghana and Africa and my former leader. So that's why I'm here.
Very good. So let's just get started.
Let me get out of your eyesight.
Yes. I know that one of the things that you did say as we discussed this topic is that you want to get a sense of the dignity and the value that governments offer to citizens by providing an enabling environment for them to flourish. Can you expand on that idea?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Obi. Yes, when I was asked what do I think trust is, I firmly believe that trust is a feeling. It is intangible and not measurable, but building trust is a very complex process because it is a feeling, and everything depends on how institutions and other people make us feel. That feeling is very important, and this is trust.
It's a feeling. Huh. Is that exactly the way you look at it, Ms. Bodwell? Is it a feeling? How do you feel about your government?
Thank you, Dr. Obi. Thank you for the question. So for me, trust is, well, I will agree that what my fellow colleague Shapers said, trust is about people. So from the perspective of an African islander, for me, building trust is all about youth inclusion, including young people in decision making so that we have a say in what happens to the development of our countries and of our continent. Yes, that's it.
Yeah? So it is about inclusion. Trust is about inclusion. Epanty?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Trust, for me, a very subjective concept. It's about the reliability. How do I believe in the other person? How do I believe in the institution? From the moment where there is this belief, both the person and the institution can go together. That's how I see trust.
Mr. Former President of Ghana, was there a trust issue at the time that you were governing? And do you think that that trust issue could have been the reason of the electoral outcome?
Obi, thank you very much for having me. And if you ask my perspective, I would say that, and I take it from when President Obama visited our country, he made a very beautiful speech. And one of the things he said was that Africa did not need strong leaders, she needed strong institutions. It was a very, epochal statement, and it's resounded, severally. I want to say that our institutions are fledgling because for almost all our countries, Ghana being the first sub-Saharan country to have gained independence, is 60 years old. But when I talk about public institutions, I'm talking about the institutions of governance and democracy. And I believe that people must have trust that those institutions will deliver the services for which they are set up. Unfortunately, most of these institutions are not as old as our country. Yes, Parliament started when we gained independence, but there have been military interventions, and so sustainable democracy in my country started in 1992. So really, the Parliament in my country is 25 years old. It's not 60 years old. And so we're still trying to consolidate and secure those institutions. But for me, if you ask me what I think of trust, it's a sovereign trust. Because every month when I work, a part of my salary is taken out as taxes. And so as a citizen, I want to be sure that whoever has been elected into governance is going to be accountable on how he uses that money, to improve my life. And so I believe that trust is sovereign. It resides in the people, holding the leaders accountable to the people.
So what happened with the elections?
I lost.
One of the things that I believe intergenerational conversations help us to do is it offers us the opportunity of review. Now that you review the 4 years that you were in government, having been entrusted public office by the people to deliver certain outcomes, what do you think?
I think that leaders must know what their people want. And even though you have a vision, the channel of communication with the people must be effective. Unfortunately, we have a multiplicity of channels now, and it makes it difficult to be able to communicate. And so, not only with the youth of my country, but with the general population. I was talking about my son at home. I enter his room, and I'm talking to Shafiq, and I say, Shafiq, I want to discuss this, and we're talking, and half the time he has his device in his hand, and he's listening to me and talking, and then going back. And I don't have his full attention, but we have a conversation somehow. But when he goes back to school and I'm at home, and I also take my device and we're communicating, I have his full attention. I send a chat, he responds, I send a chat, he responds, I send a chat, he responds. So the question I ask myself is, what is a channel of communication that we can use to reach the younger citizens of our country? Because they are the majority now. 60% of our citizens are below 35 years. And so how do we communicate with them? How does government communicate with them to let them know what we're doing on behalf of the people? I had an incumbency, a disadvantage going into this election. I managed the economy. I knew what the economy could give the people. And I told the people the truth, that we need more hard work to be able to get out of the rut in which we are. My opponents promised heaven, and you have the constraints of not being able to promise all the rosy things that he was doing. And so the people made a choice and voted me out. But I believe it's part of the learning curve for all of us. If he's able to deliver on his promises, good. If he's not able to, I mean, the people would have learned that not all that glitters is gold.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. President Kikwete, you know, you inherited a democracy that's longer than that of Ghana. As a matter of fact, one of the exciting things about democracy in Tanzania is that, unlike many other counterpart countries, it never suffered a truncation. And so the stability and sustainability of institutions of democracy should be taken as a given in a place like Tanzania, but it ends up not being quite so. Because there have been challenges with some of the institutions of democracy. Were there some that you had to grapple with on the basis of being a leader in a multi-plural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society where there were tensions sometimes in terms of decision-making, and therefore ended up making decisions that some people sat with, perhaps without full information, and said, I don't trust this decision that has just been made?
Well, I'm trying to visualize which decision I made people had problems with. But let me start from a theoretical standpoint. One is that society has always been organizing and managing its affairs through institutions. The family organizes the relations between a man and a woman. If the family was not created as an institution, it would just be like chicken. The rooster chasing the hen. But society decided to organize in families, human beings. Of course, the state, to run the affairs of the state, with the executive, the judiciary, the legislature and the judiciary. In business, companies. So trust, it all depends upon each institution has got its own character, and therefore trust is defined by the character of that particular institution. If it is a marriage, is how the husband behaves and how the wife behaves. In government, of course, we have in state, of course, we have a multiplicity of institutions. You have the executive. The executive is where now you have the president, you have the cabinet, you have the institutions. So you have the police, you have the army, you have all these other institutions. Trust depends upon, first, how these institutions are structured. Because in some instances, you have people we lose trust in the institution simply the way that the institution is structured. The law, because it is structured in a manner that it is not effective. It does not perform well. If you get to a situation where the institution does not perform well, the society loses trust in that institution. But institutions don't run themselves. There are people who run those institutions. It's the kind of people who run the institutions. If you have competent people, people will have trust in that institution. If you have people who are of low integrity, people will lose trust in that institution. So trust in an institution also depends upon the way it is structured. If it is the constitution, it is the law that establishes the institution. But it also depends on the confidence people have in the persons, the people who have been entrusted to man those institutions. So,
yes,
when I became president, of course, when you become president, you are in charge of many institutions. Of course, if you go to the judiciary, is in the dispensing of justice. Do people have to pay to get their justice? If it is in parliament, it is how parliamentarians speak about the interests of their people, that the people who sent them there. So these are them. The specific question, well, of course, when you become president, you look at every institution. And on all these institutions, you identify the challenges. So let me take, for example, of course, corruption has been one of those big problems. And one thing that I had trust in is that these are problems that depend on building strong institutions. If you build strong institutions, then you find society functioning well. So in the case of corruption, we said, okay, fine. We have an anti-corruption bureau. We have to strengthen this institution.
Yeah.
What we did, first thing, we looked at the law that established the institution. It had only 4 types of crimes. Then we looked at it, we defined it, and had a list of 24, which also included using your office or causing loss to the state, because the focus was only on if he takes money, puts in the pocket. But see, that's but we broadened the definition of what constitutes crime, corruption in society. So this is one. And then, of course, we looked at the people. We man the people. And then it all depends upon, we had a system of regularly vetting, so that even those who are in those institutions should not themselves use those offices to go and extort bribes.
Right.
So it is, as I'm saying, trust in my view to institution. One is that how that institution is structured, the people you have in those institutions who man those institutions, because these two things will determine on the way that institution functions. If it functions well, you have people of trust in it. If it does not function well, people will not have much trust. I think that's how I started.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said that when a person takes a position of public trust, they become public property. Now, what is it that we know about public property? Public property is supposed to be accessible. Public property is supposed to be owned by everyone. Do the young ones of Africa feel like they own the nation state? Do they feel a sense that the nation state in which they are growing is one that they are even they even have any affinity with? Do they get a sense that the nation state recognizes that they exist? I'll start with you.
You know the funny reaction when, even before you had finished asking the question, I just saw, I saw my answer.
Was that a question you were waiting that we should be able to tackle? Excellent. So it looks like we're getting onto it. So carry on, yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Obi. So the question that you've just asked is something that we have been discussing in many sessions. How do we include young people and build that relationship between the different institution, governments, and young people? How do we include young people on decision-making platform, on policy-making platform? Do we really feel that we own the nation and the institutions? The relationship that we share with the government. How do the government value us as young people? If they do value us, then give us that platform that we are asking for. Give us the opportunity to be on policy making, not as politicians use young people to be activists on the field, but give us position. Give us positions in the structure, responsibility in the structure. And from that responsibility, we create that accountability and that ownership of being part of the organization and being part of the nation.
Excellent. Yes, Ms. Bodwell?
I absolutely agree with what Raksha said, and also to comment on what President Mahama said regarding technology. I think we need to ask ourselves, how are we going to use technology, specifically social media, to reach out to young people and bridge the gap between government and citizen? So for instance, how many of our ministers, of our presidents are on Twitter, on Facebook, and how responsive are they to issues raised by young people? I think this is something we should ask ourselves and think about it. And something else, Dr. Obi, you spoke about diversity. And personally, I feel like that we should be able to embrace diversity. And as a Seychelles, coming from the country known as the melting pot of the Indian Ocean, I feel that we should be able to embrace what our citizens are able to contribute. Thank you.
Mbanda?
Thank you, Doctor. I thank the World Economic Forum because it permits us now to sit with our president and discuss.
You have a right to sit with the president any day. You see, that's part of the whole concept of institutions and public trust. It is the fact that these presidents, not because they are former, even when they were presidents, the citizen's voice is part of what helps build institutions. So besides the World Economic Forum, you must have a sense that your voice is recognized.
Exactly. It's not all about sitting on the same table with the presidents, the ministers, but it's also the ministers, the presidents, to take into consideration our solutions we propose, our perspectives, because we are on the ground, we are the young ones, we have the ideas, we have the creative ideas. in Cameroon, for example, it will be very difficult to sit down with a president or a minister. Even if you have to invite a minister to come, a pretext will come up for him not to come, or he may send somebody that's very far in terms of positioning. So I would really like to commend the World Economic Forum for permitting us today to sit and discuss on this pertinent issue of trust.
Okay, well, he still is thanking World Economic Forum. Is there someone amongst you who is saying, I need to get my president when I get back home responding to the issues that matter to me? Now, why is that not happening? And how do you think we can get that to happen? It's time for the audience to begin to generate some issues and questions for us. We've got about 10 minutes with you, and then we'll come back this way.
Thank you very much. Marc-Olivier Hainaut, Global Shaper from the Yaoundé Hub in Cameroon. I have a suggestion. Young people need to get involved in the decision-making process. They need to feel that your voices are heard. I totally agree with that, and I think there is a widespread consensus that needs to happen.
How?
Professor Schwab today spoke about the future of leadership. He spoke about
I just asked you a follow-on question. How?
Yes,
Needs
exactly.
to is
Need to.
different from how it will happen.
Exactly. That's just 1 minute. I'll get to it. My solution for this to happen is leaders need to coin their vision. It's about having the vision. I feel if African leaders go back to the vision-based leadership and they ensure that their vision encompasses the views of the majority of the young people, then you don't need to sit in government. You don't need to sit in the institution. If the vision has been laid by the leader and every young person can find his voice or can find his future in that vision, then everybody, no matter in what sector of the economy or the country where he works, everybody would walk in the vision and will feel that he's part of something bigger.
Okay.
So I think African leaders should go back to the visionaries to lay the vision, make sure that the vision encompasses the voices of everybody, and I think all the young people will work towards that vision.
Okay, very good. Is there someone who thinks that there's an accountability deficit that creates the basis for distrust? And how do you fix that?
My name is Ibrahim Mustafa from Tamale Hub, a global shipper. And I want to touch on a little about the earlier question. And when I get back to my country, I'm not only going to get the president to sit with the president, I'm going to make sure that of the social entrepreneurs I've seen doing great things, I'm going to replicate that in other young guys so that when they are doing great things, my president will call them to sit with them. They will not call my president to sit with my president. Because if my president should see me conversing with the president of South Africa, they will know that this guy has a potential. So it's a two-way affair. First of all, let's be productive, and let's let them know that we know what we are about. And then they'll be able to
Very
talk to
good.
us.
You know, because a thriving private sector is part of the idea of institutions building. And I believe that for most of Africa's young people, in some of the countries, more than 70%, a country like Niger has more than 70% in the young category of its population. In Nigeria, we're more than 50%. In Ghana, it's almost 60%. In Tanzania, it's about 55 or so?
63.
63%. So it's a young population. And so part of the idea of the lack of trust, could it be a sense that the young are not getting what they consider a fair deal in growth that is being produced in society? Is there anyone who has an idea on that? Yes?
Hi, good evening. Elena from Maputo Hub, Global Shaper. I just wanted to follow, answer to your question and follow on the previous one on accountability. And I think with regards to accountability and institutions, what makes me feel that there is a bit of lack of accountability is the difference between what happens in a private sector. You're given goals or you establish a target, you need to meet it. If you don't meet it, you may be discharged. In the public sector or even with politicians, they're free to make whatever promise, especially to the young people. They can get a vote, but once they're voted and they are in power, there is no accountable system to say, you have promised us something, but you're doing nothing to now promise until there is going to be the next election. And that's the only way that a politician can prove himself. So that's a question back. Is there a legal system or an institutional system to ensure accountability along the way to what is promised in a political campaign?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a global shaper from South Africa? You're from South Africa. Okay. So what's going on with trust in this land at the moment, as far as institutions are concerned?
Amanda Omate from the Global Shapers Durban Hub. To answer your question, I think fundamentally, post-94, we were about social cohesion, but we didn't actually look at the trust element as a people, regardless of the political sphere. We didn't learn to trust each other across racial lines, across cultural lines, across our tribal lines. And so what has happened is that it has infiltrated into the political sphere. And now you have an uprising where people feel there should be an element of accountability from our political leaders and so forth. But when you break it down into even grassroots level, just individually, a perfect example that the Minister of Finance made, NSFAS, a student fund that's meant to support students studying in universities. But when you actually analyze how students get that, there's a lot of corruption in line that takes place there. And when you say to people, corruption is in all forms, societally, as people, we even individually at times commit corruption. It's just that it's not highlighted, it's not in media, that then you realize that people have missed the point of trust, of developing trust. And hence, we then look to our leaders to be the ones to show us trust, when actually trust is a societal issue.
She raises a very significant point on the conversation around trust, because there are two variants of trust in society. There's the political trust and there's the social trust. The political trust being the trust that citizens have in the systems and the procedures and the structures on the basic rule of law in democracy, on the systems of accountability, the checks and balances, and in the fact that policies would be made for the greater good of the greater number. And then there is the social trust, the trust amongst citizens, how citizens relate and trust one another. And you find that the interaction of political trust, social trust, and their combination leads to social capital. Without social capital, it's almost impossible for any society to develop, because the rule of law and all other things that gradually build from just basic law to true institutions are driven by a lot of social capital. Which country are you from where you would say to us that you have high social capital on the continent? Oh, I see a hand saying they've got high social capital. We want to know what country, and then you tell us what you think led to your accumulating the level of social capital.
I'm from Singapore.
Ah, well, we know. Well, we know. Go ahead.
So we were a very poor country. When we were independent, our GDP is the same as Kenya. And by a leader, if we can, we have a prime minister called Lee Kuan Yew, and he is a little bit, let's say, quite authoritarian, benevolent dictator, if you like. But the intention to solve the problem, to lift people out of poverty, was there, and with the competence. So what I think is that if we focus on finding good leaders, rather than which system, we say, oh, it must be democracy, or it should be this or that. Actually, if you have lousy leader, whatever system, it doesn't matter. You will still have lousy result. So if you focus on nurturing a lot of good leaders, then eventually you go to election, you can choose the one that is better. But if the election is giving you the people who overpromise, cannot deliver, then you don't have much choice, you see. So focus on finding good leader rather than whether it is democracy or any other system.
Oh, thank you very much. How many of you think that if you looked around the continent right now, we have a good stock of good leaders? Let me see your hands. Only one person thinks we have a stock of good leaders?
The global shapers.
Okay, no, I'm not talking about the shapers now. This is not an assessment of the shapers. I'm saying political leadership of the continent. How many of you think we have a stock of good leaders? About 2 hands are up, 3 hands. Okay, so the rest of you are saying we have a serious leadership problem. And we've had the gentleman tell us what we already know, because if you haven't read it, surely you must get that book, From Third World to First. And, oh, you want to say something?
The discussion is so good. Congratulations. I am Lourdes Fernandes from Angola. And I would like to, I raise my hand saying that we have good leaders. Because for me, it's not the point only the leader. I love the word working together works. The leader cannot do the thing by himself. What we do as a citizen of a country, we know the country has the problem. The leader is a person as you are, we are. I agree completely with the Singapore. The point is the leaders, but we are also leaders. What we are doing to contribute for the sustainable development of our country and our continent, that's the question we have to make. It's only the leader, one person. It's what we do together. It's why working together works.
And excellent. So let's come back to this side of the room. And what she's just put a finger on is the fact that citizenship and the participation of the civil society is crucial for leading any country. And yet, there is no way that the tail can wag the dog. There is still the necessity for there to be the kind of leadership that gives sensible direction as to where country should be going. What is it that made us diverge from Singapore? The same in the case of Ghana, even in the case of Tanzania. Similarly colonized by Great Britain, have cultural and a lot of historical similarities, impoverished nations in the 60s, and then leadership of Lee Kuan Yew. Why is it that Lee Kuan Yew died and so many Singaporeans couldn't even be consoled? That's trust. They had enormous trust. Compared to somebody dies in some of the African countries and their citizens clap. Lack of trust. What is it that we've gotten wrong about leadership on the continent? Look at the number of hands that refused to be raised when we asked for an assessment on the quality of leadership on the continent. Mr. President, does that not make you sad?
It does, and indeed it raises many issues that we need to look at. We have begun to debate the issue of development first, democracy later. You find on the continent that there are countries where open society, free expression, there are few curtailments on those things. You find that some of those countries are moving much faster than countries where you have more open society and free expression. So do you develop first before you create an open society and allow people to express themselves freely? Or it's democracy first and development later, or democracy and development side by side? These are all issues that countries have to grapple with as a paradigm for creating the societies that they need. But I believe that, so trust exists. It is strengthening that public trust that is important. What do you do to strengthen the public trust? Trust exists already, because as long as you go to the polls.
Assumption?
No, I'm saying that it must exist. There's a sovereign trust.
Okay, it must exist.
Yeah, if you elect leaders, you elect them because you think that they will attain a certain objective. And so that trust exists. How to strengthen that trust?
Mr. President, I'm going to, remember I said I'm going to push.
Yes.
So I'm now in my push mode.
Yeah.
Trust exists, and because you elected leaders, what if you really didn't elect the leaders? Because part of the institutions that create distrust are institutions of politics. Institutions of politics can be hijacked, and the outcome of the electoral process may not be a reflection
of the will
of the people.
Yeah,
so,
I was actually going to come to that. And the kind of trust I'm talking about is sovereign trust, that you elect leaders, and so there's a certain sovereign trust that they will do what you expect them to do. And my point is that there are ingredients that strengthen that level of trust, that society is open, that you have civil society organizations and other institutions that hold the leadership accountable to the people, that you have a free and vibrant media that is able to question issues of governance, and that you have the kinds of instruments where that leadership is held accountable. How we strengthen those institutions to be able to hold leadership accountable is a very critical issue. But let me address the issue of dissatisfaction with establishment. It's not a phenomenon only in Africa. It's not a phenomenon only in the developing world. There's an increasing mistrust of the establishment even in the developed world. And that is what is leading to populism across Europe, across America. People are dissatisfied with the establishment. When Trump says, I'm going to drain the swamp, what is he talking about? When they talk about Wall Street and distrust for Wall Street and Washington, what are they talking about? It is because a certain gap develops between the leadership and the people. And the people don't feel that the leadership represents their interests adequately enough. And so this issue about lack of trust in public institutions and governance is not an issue that we are grappling with alone in Africa. People, even in the developed world, are grappling with it.
Yes.
And the point you need to ask is, what is the interest of our people? What do our people care about? And those interests are so varied now. You go to US and somebody says about transgender rights. I don't have a bathroom when I have to go and do my stuff. And so that's what his interest is. Somebody says, I want to marry somebody, and they say, I can't marry him, but I love him. And so in this state, I can't marry. Those are the things they care about. Somebody says morality is gone to hell and the country is no longer Christian. That is what I care about. How do leaders connect with the things that their people care about? For me, that is the question that we must be asking ourselves.
Okay, so let me say that the reason that I recognize the challenges around the world where we have a fundamental disconnect between the people and those that govern them. But let's just stay with the continent, because we've been battling with our own before the rest of the world caught on to it. Ours existed simply because when you look at the natural resources rich countries, many of the people just hear about the billions of dollars, hundreds of them, that have been earned by those countries over time. they cannot see the evidence of its impact on them. Things like that create the gap in trust. The president seems to be suggesting, I'm back to you, my young friends, the president seemed to be suggesting that we might consider trading off democracy for development. Is that something that you're comfortable with, considering that part of what helps your own generation is greater openness, greater freedom to innovate, to be creative, and to be highly productive and to connect with various people of the world? Would you like to trade off democracy for development?
Democracy might not be the best option that we have, but it is, no, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Democracy might not be the perfect system that we have, but yet, in our today's life, it's the best solution that we have. Trading democracy with development is not something that I would go for. It should go side by side. We should not choose one among these two. We need to find the equilibrium, the balance, how to keep democracy and continue to develop.
Excellent. Yes, Ms. Bodwell. Let me ask you, when you look at the institution of the Auditor General, which is where you work, and you look at what goes on in the country, and you know that a lot of the people keep being puzzled as to how does government spend our money? What are the kinds of things that you sitting there as a young person and looking at the people in authority, you're saying, I wish I could do differently from what they are doing?
Thank you, Dr. Obi, for your question. Firstly, I would say that freedom and openness, this is the way forward, definitely. And from the perspective of an employee of the Office of the Auditor General, our institution is mandated to report on public accounts and how effectively and efficiently government institutions are using, public money. And so I would say that it's important that as the Auditor General itself, the office, it's important that the office reflects this kind of transparency and accountability in order to inspire trust in the people. Yes.
Okay. Well, Agbor, let me, your thing is the judiciary. And we know that without a judiciary that is independent and that really is effective, there's no way the common person in society can be guaranteed a sense of equality. So you're from a wonderful example of where the common person is wondering when democracy will take off. Is that part of the reason that you love being on this panel besides sitting with the president?
Thank you very much. But before I answer that question, let me go back to her intervention. The basic definition of democracy, it is government of the people, by the people. So it's all about the people. And now we know 75% or more than 70% of the people are the youths. So it's all about the youths. So we cannot talk of trading democracy for development because we need the people, democracy for the development. Now, let me talk about the judiciary, which I master most. The basic principles, the basic political administrative principles, which are accountability, reliability, transparency, and predictability, are necessary to establish trust. I'll go back, if you permit me. I would like to quote the Minister of Justice and Human Rights of Congo, Mr. Pierre Mbanda, just recently, on the 22nd of April, 2017, he said, let me go fast. Let me quote. Talking of registries, he said, you have transformed them into a commercial avenue where you do business. You trick litigants and systematically request money from them. You extract documents from case files, make disappear, causing litigants to lose a trial. This has become the rule in all registries. You have created an illegal network, put pickets at every corner of courts to rob and extort money from people. You recover fines due for judgment, intended for the state and put in your pocket. Your kings, your chiefs, your bosses. It is clear that in this context, we cannot talk of trust, because the ordinary litigant doesn't know if any day he will win a trial. So therefore, I think we should build more on instituting systems of checks and balances.
So what are you going to do about Cameroon?
In Cameroon,
yes,
I had a couple of solutions I came up with.
Very good. We want to hear some of it, because we are very interested in multi-plural democracy in Cameroon.
As I was discussing with some of my shippers, I think that one of the most important things we should do is to eliminate human interaction when it comes to payment of fines due to state, due to be paid to the state. Why eliminate the human interaction? This leads to corruption, because when we have to pay that money, the authority or the person in front of you want to negotiate. For example, instead of paying 10,000 francs, the person will tell you, pay 7,000 francs, 2,000 francs comes to my pocket, and 5,000 francs goes to the state. So I think we should try to institute systems that will completely eliminate the human interaction.
Okay.
I think, as I already said, we institute systems of checks and balances, as well as a computerized monitoring of files, so we don't lose files again, and for many points, we may be able to know the files and the documents that are in every case files, so we may not complain.
You really love the tunnel of justice, because I was trying my best to get you to shift into the macro. One of the things that we found is that the justice system is as effective as the strength of democratic practices in a society. And so for the young people in Cameroon, one of the things that should be part of your conversation is, how do we achieve that conversation that our sister from Angola, she also needs to take that home. The fact that civil society must engage in a conversation about what kind of democracy should we have in this society that still achieves development. We have had democracies that achieved development. They didn't need to trade off, freedom. They didn't need to trade off public accountability. They didn't need to trade off transparency. They were real democratic institutions, practices, ethos, and principles. We need to see more of that on the continent. It would help build trust. Mr. President Kikwete, one of the things that helps with trust is freedom of information. The fact that citizens can know exactly the basis of decisions, whether they are policy decisions or decisions on public finance or institutional decisions. What do you think is making even countries where we have Freedom of Information Act to be what's the word? I think the right word is almost hostile to the idea of opening up fully to citizens so that they can follow and therefore say, I believe in what has been done, or I don't believe and I need more explanation?
Well, you know, when I was president, I never had that problem. People had a lot of freedoms. We made freedom of the press. We made the report of the Controller General to be a public document and to be discussed in Parliament, open sessions of Parliament. So I really don't know what example to talk about. If it is another country, I don't know which one, so I have problems discussing that. But let me say one thing. Let me answer a question that has been asked by the youth here. They need to be heard. Again, we come back to the same subject of discussion. Institution. As you say, 60% are youth. How does a president listen to 60%? You must be organized in institutions. And when you organize in institutions, that is when you have a forum and the modality of reaching out to the leadership. But if you sit in individually, say people don't listen to us, and you are there with your friend, how would the president listen? Of course, it all depends upon how things are structured. My experience in our country, you know, we had a strong youth movement. Youth movement. First, it was used by our leadership to train leaders. I come from the youth movement. At a very young age, I was given responsibility in a district, and then come to a region, in the military, and then you are moved from place to place until you get to a point where now you can be trusted with a big responsibility. I became the youngest foreign finance minister. It is a question of trust. So it is also the issue of leadership, how the leaders prepare the young people to assume responsibility when they also grow up. But I think if you want to be heard, please organize yourself into institutions. Mauritius has this council. You have a youth council. You can't again complain about you not being heard. What are you doing in the youth council? It has been created as a forum for the young people to sit down, talk about their issues, and have these issues delivered to the leadership of the country. But where you don't have organizations, forum where youth can sit down, discuss their issues, and then channel them to the leadership, you will always continue to complain. So we're going back to the same thing. Okay. Create institutions.
Okay. You have a final thing to say. We're now out of time.
I noticed we're out of time. I just had a final point. I think that we must also be talking about devolution of power and government and decentralization. That is one of the problems. Everybody sees the elected president and everybody wants his attention. It's not possible. But if we have stronger institutions at the level where people's participation takes place, for instance, in Ghana, we have what we call the district assemblies. The district assemblies are the single units at the local government level where people have the opportunity to participate in government. One of the things we realized was that it was the president appointing the district chief executives who are the heads of those district units. And so we're amending the constitution and saying, let those people at that level also be accountable to the people. So let them be elected. And so they often, when they have an interface or a problem with the population, say, so I'm the president's representative. Now you're going to be the people's representative because they're going to directly vote you into office. Excellent. And so I think how we devolve the power of government so that people are being listened to at the lowest unit of governance would also help.
Excellent. Some of the words,
Dr. Obi,
Yes.
can I just add something?
Okay.
I know we are short
I'm
of time.
conscious of the time, but
I know we're short of time, but I just wanted to comment on what President Kikwete just said about the National Youth Council of Mauritius. Actually, I would like to share.
No, you shouldn't be defensive.
No.
He wasn't criticizing you.
we don't have time.
It's not about being defensive. I'm sharing how privileged we are actually in Mauritius to have the National Youth Council, to have a chairperson who is only 28 years old, who is young and lead together with young people of the Regional Youth Council. We are part of policy making in Mauritius. We are part of decision-making platforms. And I would love to share tomorrow, in my absence, my Regional Youth Council presidents are having a meeting with the Ministry of Finance to discuss and being consulted on the national budget. We have that opportunity. And as a young African, I would love to see other African countries also, our young people, my brothers and sisters, to have that platform.
Excellent. So part of what helps is the kind of best practices people go home with. There are national youth councils in some other countries, but they are only almost activated during elections. That's what the politicians use in order to gain their political power. As soon as they gain office, they forget them. But Mauritius is presenting us a best practice. This is the kind of thing that we should all learn to take away when we come to these kinds of gatherings. Another thing that came out a lot was transparency, accountability, access, inclusion, voice. We spoke about the fact that leadership as well as followership would be important. Now, whatever and however you look at the idea of institutions, I need you to know that institutions don't just happen. Institutions evolve. They evolve out of processes of social order. They are mechanisms, they are systems of social order that guide the way people behave. The most significant instrument for galvanizing society in a particular direction is the rule of law. We can't afford to be lawless societies where the capricious leaders can determine the life and the death of anyone. You have now heard that your generation make up more than 50% on the continent. What that says to us is that you can redefine the continent. What kind of continent do you want? That's the question that you need to be pondering, even as I say, join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.